The monster had just one wish. That was to protect his banquet at all costs. But the people would not leave him alone. They kept stealing his food. They kept bothering him. And he was tired, so tired of eating these bothersome people.
I'm drinking gin and tonic today because Pan's Labyrinth is a classy kind of film. Oh, and one of my top 5 horrors I've ever watched. If you haven't seen it, watch it because it is beautiful. But first, watch this. Oh, and subscribe too.
The monster had a plan. He knew that if he enlisted the help of a makeup artist, she could turn herself into him, create a decoy and keep all those bothersome people away from his banquet. So the makeup artist worked tirelessly night and day to turn herself into him. First she created his eyes. She made the eyeballs from silk clay, she let them dry, and then she created his eyelids with some latex and cotton wool. She ensured the edges were nice and thin so they'd blend into her hands, thus creating the illusion. She painted the eyeballs with alcohol paints. She wanted them to look as realistic as possible. She had to make sure she looked just like the pale man. Layer after thin layer of paint she added to make the skin look nice and realistic. She added definition around the eyes and then she painted the eyeballs slightly yellow so they didn't look too glaringly white. She then even painted some wrinkles around the eyes. She had to make sure that this illusion held up. Once she'd finished painting the eyeballs, she used plenty of baby powder and carefully peeled the eyeballs off the table, taking the utmost care to ensure that the latex did not stick to itself. With the eyeballs complete, it was time to move on to the face. The face of the pale man was a strange face indeed, so she pondered over how to do this and she decided to use a combination of latex and cotton wool and latex paste. First of all, she stuck some cotton wool balls over the eyes to protect them. Then she applied a thick layer of cotton wool over the top of that to start shaping the strange fellow's face. She made a note of where the eyes were by making marks with an eyeliner pencil. She then smoothed over lots and lots of latex to create the base for her latex paste. She used exactly the same process for the pale man's chin, smoothing lots of latex over and then using her tools to make sure she created all the indentations on his chin. She had to take the utmost care to ensure that she sold this illusion to the best of her abilities. But how, she thought to herself, do I make those strange flappy bits of skin at the bottom of his face? Well, craft foam came to the rescue. She held the craft foam up to the face and she marked out with a lip liner pencil the shapes of the gills. She then cut them out, all the different sizes and shapes, and then she stuck them together with latex and stuck them to the face cast with a little bit more latex. And once these flappy gills were in place, she moved on to creating the pale man's skin. She did this by creating a paste with latex and flour. The latex and flour paste had to be mixed very slowly and very carefully, a little bit of flour at a time, lots of mixing until she achieved the desired thickness. Once she had, she smoothed this concoction over the armature she'd created with the latex and cotton wool and the craft foam. She smoothed and she smoothed. It was a bit like icing a cake, she thought. She smoothed and she smoothed some more with plenty of latex on her fingertips. Once she was happy with the shape of the face, she created the pale man's nostrils by dipping the end of her makeup brush into some latex and sticking it straight in there. Once the makeup artist was happy with the way the pale man's face was looking, she decided it was time to start painting. He was a pale fellow indeed, so she started off with a nice white base. Once the white base was complete, she moved in with some pink on those flappy bits, right on the edges. She put them on with a cotton bud and she blended with that sponge. She also added a little bit of pink around those nostrils and around the pale man's mouth. She couldn't forget to paint the underside of those flappy bits. And then she painted more of the palest white over that pink, just to tone it down a little touch. Once the makeup artist was happy with the pink and the white, she went in with a tiny touch of purple just to add a little bit of definition. In order to do this, she used alcohol-activated paints, but she realised that not everybody in the land was able to use alcohol-activated paints because you need many gold coins to buy them. But she mused that if her followers didn't have alcohol-activated paints, they could use whatever they happened to have at home to create the same effect. And then she moved on to painting the edges of those skin flaps with some dark brown, just to add a little bit of definition. She then went back over with more of that white, just to blend the pink and the brown together. And the makeup artist couldn't help but chuckle to herself as she mused that the skin flaps looked a little bit like ham. Once the pale man was dry, she used plenty of baby powder and she dropped him on the floor. But once she picked him back up, she used plenty of baby powder to ensure that she was able to peel him off the face cast without the latex sticking to itself. The makeup artist tried the pale man mask against her face and was quite startled as to how much she looked like him. She also had to make sure she cut out holes in those nostrils so that she could actually see what she was doing. And now it was time to paint her face. She started by painting her eyes black. It looked a bit like the Mask of Zorro, but she needed to make sure their eyes looked nice and black so they couldn't be seen through those nostril holes. She then wrapped her hair around her head and applied a bold cap, looking very much like a thumb. Once she looked like a thumb, it was time to move on to the next stage. The makeup artist took some skin adhesive and glued that bold cap down so that it stuck down nice and firm. Once she'd stuck down all the edges of the bold cap, she made sure she cut a hole for her ears, and then she mused later on, why did she do this? Because the pale man does not have ears. But we'll ignore that part. Once she'd stuck down the bold cap, she took some of that palest white and put it all over that cap and then all over her chest and upper torso. But she had to muse that if anybody else decides to turn themselves into the pale man and actually go out in public, they should really wear a morph suit and not just paint their body, because they may well get arrested by the guards in the land. Then she decided she needed to paint all the folds and wrinkles and ribs onto herself that the pale man possessed. So she painted them on with body paint, and she used her sponge to make sure she blended them really well. They had to look realistic after all. Once she'd done that, she added some more shadow with more body paint on that sponge. She'd also noticed that pale as the pale man was, he also had a little bit of redness, so she applied that too using some more water-based face paint, and then she added more of his folds and creases, and she shaded them even more with some eyeshadow to make them look extra realistic and to give them depth and dimension. For a finishing touch, the makeup artist took some white cream paint and applied some highlights, thus further creating the illusion of 3D depth. She then stuck those eyes to her hands, applying lots of skin adhesive, letting it go clear and tacky, and sticking them down, and then using extra just to stick around those edges to make sure they were really firmly on there. Whilst trying to make the adhesive go clear and tacky, the makeup artist kept getting glue in her mouth. She did not like that much. She then used some latex to further blend those edges, and the eyes were complete. Now it was time to move on to the pale man's face. Again, lots more of that adhesive in there. Let it go clear and tacky, and then apply the pale man's face straight to her own. She's going in. Now she's looking so much like the pale man, it is untrue. She then went in with extra latex on those edges to make sure that the pale man's face was blended to her own. And now it was time to apply yet more painting magic and create the pale man's mouth. Red around the edges, white in the middle, and then lots of little teeth which she painted with a nice fine brush. The makeup artist then used yet more of that palest white to ensure that the face was completely blended with the mask and that her hands were blended too. The final touch was some blacks on the very tips of her fingers, and then she was done. And as the makeup artist sat back and looked at her work, she couldn't help but be startled by the transformation. The makeup artist really hoped that her followers were just as startled by the transformation as she was, and she really also hoped that they would give her video a big thumbs up and subscribe to her channel, because she needed more subscribers, way more subscribers. And as for the pale man, well, he was so happy with the makeup artist's work, he vowed never to eat another person ever again, and his banquet was safe. And as our strange fairy tale comes to a close, all that remains is for us to say thank you for watching, and we shall see you next time.